Go. So we are live. Let's see. Do I get the notification? It's always random how I get the notification. I don't always get it. So, so how have things been for you, Maya? Like how like start. I feel like startups are the ones that are either getting crushed or they're doing really well during this time, right?
Yeah, I know. It's very challenging if you don't have a long runway ahead of you, if you haven't raised enough funds, or if you're in an industry that got hit right now. So it's definitely challenging, more challenging for startups because they're basically, fighting for their lives right now.
Yeah, no, I mean I've seen it. I mean, fortunately, like, well, I'm a startup, and then it's like I want like for my business, this is ends up I'm okay, right? A lot of people are still looking for work. I'm not burning a lot of money because I know some of those startups are like they burn through so much cash and
Yeah.
they're dependent on like this. I mean, what startups have you seen that are sort of like really taken, like really done well or exploded? And what have you sort of seen with that?
Well, we've obviously all heard of Zoom.
Yeah, Zoom. Yeah,
But I think there are actually a few other startups. Anyone who is giving services to other businesses in areas that were not hit. So I think actually the SaaS B2B market is not as
yeah,
affected by what's happening. Anyone working on developer tools, because, developers can still work from home.
yeah.
So there are definitely a couple of industries that are still doing well.
So what are some startup industries that you see just got hit, right? Because they were servicing certain areas that just got like hammered and they kind of have to really think about their future going forward.
Definitely anyone in travel.
Oh yeah, travel, all those travel stuff. Like when I always go to like different pitch competitions and stuff. And everywhere you go, there's always someone with a travel startup, and it's always the same idea. And it's like there are two startups I'm pretty sure you've seen that have historically just struggled. Two types. It's the find people around you that have similar interests. I'm pretty sure you've seen that, and the business card app, right? The business card. Those are two startups that I see all the time, and I feel bad because it's like I'm not saying that it can't work, but you have to do something so different when there were 1,000 startups. Like I remember even back when I was 6 years ago, same idea. It was like cool. I was like, okay. And then I've seen it everywhere I go. There's always the travel, find people around you, and the business card app all the time. And it's like, I feel like you should at least Google your startup.
I think the problem is no one cracked it yet. No one
Yeah.
actually presented a solution that is better than just like exchanging business cards. If
Yeah.
it's more complicated, why would I pay for it?
Yeah. Because you would need like that adoption period, right? It's one thing if everybody uses it, right? But if you're not going to get people on it, and as business owners, you just carry a business card because it's your business, right? Or you find a way to follow up with the right people.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So I mean, how have things? I mean, what inputs do you have, Chris?
I think it's kind of feast or famine right now, right? I mean, it's generally people are either pivoting and making really good decisions about taking advantage of the market share that's available, or they're missing an opportunity and kind of just waiting for things to blow over and maybe even shutting down their marketing, which is one of the worst decisions that you can really make right now, unless it's truly not thinking about the cash flow, right? Because marketing doesn't have to be about high expense activities. It can be low cost and still be really effective.
Yeah.
So I think that people just need to be thinking about how they're doing things, not so much whether they do or don't do things.
Yeah. No, I think that's a
Yeah,
great
I
point.
agree.
So someone asked, how would you market for healthcare startups?
Well, that's a very broad
Yeah. So look,
description.
you know what? I'll kind of ask. I think just for the guests, be a little more specific because it's, you get a lot of people who, I'm on different Discord groups and online groups, and you'll get people like who are, newbies, right? That's whatever the term is, and they'll say, "Hey, how do I get started in affiliate marketing?" And it's such a broad category. And I'll go back. I'll be like, "What are you good at?" And they'll say, "Oh, I'm good at this." I'll be like, they'll say science, and I'll say, "How do you get started in science?" And then they realize like, okay, now I know what I'm asking. Because, a lot of times, so for Angie, what would you kind of say? Because healthcare is such a big space, right? You have the watches, you have the wearables, you have the actual technology. There's a lot of data analytics there. So, yeah, so we have 9 people on. B, nice to see you. A B also said nice haircut.
So
Yes. You know what's funny? I had a meeting with Chris earlier today at like 3:30 p.m. And that's when you got no. I had a meeting at Chris. So at 3:30 a.m. I was talking with Chris, and then I'm like, oh, you got a haircut.
So it's a funny story. My wife has been talking about wanting to do it for a while. It was getting really long, and I mean, I kept it managed, but so we've been joking about it, and she's been research. How do you cut guys' hair? And then we've been joking about doing it on the show too. So it just happened last night. I was like, okay, let's do it. And she's like, okay. We pulled out the shears and went for it. So there's a learning curve to it because it's not a true buzz. I tried not to go right down to the.
What number is it? What number did you get? 3?
I think we started with a 9 on top and a 3 up the sides.
You know what those numbers represent?
It's supposed to be millimeters, I think, right?
No. So apparently, this live always goes off track. So
no, but it's super interesting. I cut my husband's hair last week, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Perfect.
Yeah, no.
Was it short or was it a little longer?
It was getting long.
Okay, that's extra long. I saw the tone in your voice. No, so apparently, Kenneth was telling me, he said the numbers sort of represent weeks from bald. So 1 is a 1 week from bald, 2 is a 2 weeks from, kind of not exact, but that's sort of like a way to kind of gauge it. I believe it is millimeters, but that's like a interesting way.
Sense. Yeah, I can see that. This is not 3 millimeters at all.
Yeah. So, just FYI. Yeah. So, I mean, talk about, what attracted you to startups, right? Because marketing is a very big area. So, what kind of got you? Did you fall into it, or were you just more attracted to it?
I actually fell into startups. So I started my marketing career in an agency doing PR, but most of our customers were actually startups. And I got to know them, I got to work with them, I got to experience a lot of the pain points, but I also saw a lot of the wins. And some of these companies actually became, unicorns. So I was very fortunate to see what it means early on. I went and tried the big company, the corporates, realized it's not for me, and kind of went back to startups.
Interesting. So do you feel like it's either love it or hate it for people when it comes to startup marketing?
Just the startup culture, because, having worked for Fortune 500s and companies with 30 people, there's a huge difference in what the day-to-day looks like. There's a huge difference in what you do and what type of marketing you actually practice. For the bigger companies, usually you want a playbook, you have processes, you're doing more of the same more often than not. With a startup, every day is completely different, and you have to be comfortable with not knowing and having that ambiguity and being okay with it. And it's not for everyone, and that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, no, I mean, so Angie, she clarified her question. She said, what are some effective marketing tips for promoting awareness about receiving treatment for breast cancer? So that's a very good specific question. Both of you can feel free to answer this.
Okay. Responded to Liam. I think the breast cancer one is kind of a challenging one because it's, in a lot of ways, it's an emotional issue or topic, right? So it's not something that you can just do a lot of advertising or really big flashy marketing. It's something where you've got to be very sensitive to what people are going through, very emotional. So to me, I would say that it almost has to be a lot of like stories, right? This person made it through it, this person made it through it, and what they did to get through it, and then build from that. At least that's how I would probably approach it initially, and then build off of that. How about you, Maya?
Yeah, and I would add to that I think it's not just about awareness. People know breast cancer exists, but it's not like top of mind. You don't have it's not a habit to go and check it as much as you do other things. So I think if you attach it to something you do, let's say yearly, and you kind of latch onto that habit and you create this loop, then maybe you have a better chance of making sure people just do it, on a regular basis, more, I don't know. I'm just trying to think of what would make me go and get tested, because unfortunately I don't do that enough, and I don't think about it as much as other things. So I would try and find that existing habit and try to see how I can connect to that. Because I don't think advertising fear works, especially with a topic like that. You don't just want to scare people like you have to get tested because, you know, this and this can happen and how many, you know, women die every year. I don't like that approach, especially when it comes to healthcare. I like to do it exactly the other way around, to try and figure out something that I care about a lot and make sure that, you know, I kind of think about breast cancer when I think about that.
No, I think that's good. And I would say out of the cancers, breast cancer has actually probably done the best job, right? Because there are two things you probably remember: breast cancer and ALS. And right? Yep. ALS did, I believe that the Ice Bucket Challenge, like that was the most, it did a lot for research. The other aspect of breast cancer, right? The color pink is really, you know, someone pink ribbon. So I think that is, right, a very effective way to sort of, and then, so lately, obviously, both of you can speak about this. It's, well, I'll kind of answer this. Someone said, "Are all new businesses startup?" And feel free to add me. My perspective is a startup has to have some method of scalability, right? That's the difference between a startup and a small business. I meet a lot of people and they say, "Hey, I have a startup," but it's like, you know, it's just because you have a lawnmower does not mean it's a lawn mowing startup, right? If you're doing something for lawn mowing technology, you're doing something to scale. I mean, that's my sort of take. I mean, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I think I agree. I think sometimes you can look at something more, and I'm borrowing the terminology from Shark Tank as a lifestyle business. Yeah. So it's something that's going to support you and your family, but it's not going to grow into this huge company and serve, you know, a bigger crowd. So I think what you said actually makes sense. Yeah.
And then, Chris, anything to add to that?
Maya did a great job, and you did a great job. So no.
No, because it's such a, obviously there's always buzzwords, right? Like AI is such a buzzword where a lot of things they say AI driven is really just like someone filtering the things, right? You know, it's not AI. AI is more like, hey, self-learning, right? Very intense algorithms to the point where even the people who program it get surprised by the results, right? That's kind of what happens, because I think whenever you speak to someone who works at Google or LinkedIn and they talk about like the algorithm, like I remember someone said that they knew a person who just focused on the people, you know, there's something called LinkedIn jail where you can't tag or you can't do certain actions. So there was one person who focused on, like, I think it was hashtag jail, where you couldn't hashtag anymore or tag anymore. So think about it. And they're so far removed from the other people who focus on the anti-spam, right? And then the other people who focus on like the privacy and the viruses, and the other people who focus on fake accounts, right? It's just so big that it's very hard to. So what do you guys feel about the marketing certificates that, to sort of, if you're a marketing student and you're looking for your first job or you're looking to transition, how do you guys feel about that? Do you guys feel they're helpful or what?
I have to be honest, I don't think I have any certifications whatsoever. Everything I learned by doing. But having said that, I spent a lot of time trying to learn on my own, and it wasn't always easy. So if certification means that I get someone else to curate all the best content and give it to me in a short period of time, oh yeah, I would love to do that. If it's just about checking boxes and I'm not going to get practical knowledge at the end of it, I don't think it's worth it.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, what do you have to add to that?
I mean, I'm in the same boat as Maya. I don't have any specific certifications associated with marketing. I don't necessarily, I think that marketing is, to a certain extent, it's intuitive. You need to understand some of the effects that are going to take place when you take certain actions. And so if those certifications teach you that, great. But most of them don't. Most of them try to teach you how to make a 5-step click funnel, and that's going to be your marketing. And to me, that falls more into the category of something like advertising, which is part of marketing, but it's not marketing as a whole. And a lot of people get those two terms mixed up. Marketing is kind of like the archetype, and then from there, you have other sub-archetypes within that.
Yeah, I think both of you guys have... Yeah, would you ask? Sorry.
I was just asking if Maya feels the same way about that as far as marketing versus some of the other things that fit within marketing.
Yeah, 100%. I think, you know, when it comes to maybe analytics and, like you mentioned, advertising, where it's very structured, you need to understand it's like mathematics in a way. So you really have to understand specific steps. then yeah, maybe a certification could be useful. I figured out how to use Google Analytics. I'm not an expert, but I know how to use it for my benefit. If you have the time and the ability to do it on your own, go ahead. If you want a shortcut, then yeah, sure, why not, take on a certification.
So before I kind of add, someone asked, true or false, startup must be technology related. I believe that's false, right? There's startups in all types of areas, doing all types of interesting things.
Yep.
So I'll kind of go back. And then I think you brought up a great point that sometimes these certifications are a great starting point. That, look, if you have no idea what you want to do in a field, right? You, Maya, and Chris, if you guys wanted to learn a specific form of marketing, you kind of have an idea. I have to go here. I have to go here. You have some background, but a young student or someone who's transitioning, they have no idea where to start. So sometimes the certification at least gives them a guideline. And Chris brought up another great point, which is a lot of times the certifications are in their products, right? You get the Hootsuite certification is how to use Hootsuite.
Yep.
If you get some Amaz SEO certification, yes, you learn SEO, but it's also for their tools and their products. So just realize that they have some limitations. They're a starting point, but I think especially for early people, sometimes you do set yourself apart. If you didn't major in marketing, maybe that's what you would do. Or if you're trying to transition from a different field, it shows initiative. So just use that. Don't think of it as the end all. Kind of, I think what I would really suggest for people is, if they want to set themselves apart, is take on your own projects. I know that especially early on, do a little marketing for a small restaurant, do a little something like that. It shows initiatives. You learn a lot. You're forced to really think and apply principles and tie it back to what you know.
Track record experience too. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I wanted to say the best way to learn how to drive traffic and create demand is to build your own website and try to figure out how to do that. If you can do that for yourself, you'll be able to do it for any other company.
Yeah, I think that's one of the way I judge marketers, right? Because obviously you get a lot of spam on LinkedIn, right? And you get these people who are like, I can grow your accounts all the time, but I'm like, your account's not grown, so like, what am I gonna do? Not that someone can't grow your account if their account's not big, but you do lose a sort of credibility, especially if you spam, right? If you spam, you lose credibility. Then if you don't have the credentials, you lose even more credibility.
Well, like you can still reach out to people. That's okay, but it's the way that you reach out. If you haven't at least tried to make it, conversational, where you're going to be drawing an answer out of a question kind of thing, or, I've seen some really great messages sent to me that got me involved in the conversation. But I've also seen some really terrible messages where it's like, I do marketing, sign up to work with me here. And it's like, I delete that. That's the first thing I do.
Same here.
Yeah. So, you got a lot. So it's all about doing the right things to set you apart. Fatima asked, given your experience, what would you say was the biggest turning point in your career in marketing? And what would be the one big thing you would recommend to aspiring marketers?
Ooh, that's a good one.
You can take your time. I'll let Chris answer first, because I think Chris answered it. He answered it before.
For me, it was my big turning point. It happened pretty early, actually. It was I worked for a few corporations, and did very well with them, but didn't really like how they treated me. The corporation, it just didn't work for me. And so from that point on, I kind of knew that it was on my own, and I was going to do what I did for the corporations, but I was going to do it in my own way. And so that's kind of where that brings us to today. But really, it was definitely driven by passion, I think, in a lot of ways. Like, I needed to be able to go bigger and go, push the boundaries and to be able to do that for people and not just be told, I want you to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, I think the first time I discovered my passion for marketing was, and this is gonna tell people how old I am, when social media just started, so Facebook, Twitter, and I got so excited, and I could feel this was gonna be something big, so I wanted in. And I was working in a completely different industry. I was a travel agent, and I decided I want to go into marketing. So I just started reading everything I could about social media. I created my own profiles. I started playing with them and just try to find a job with an agency that was actually doing that. But just realizing how fulfilling it was. So going from travel agent, that was nice, but it was never my thing, to doing something that really got me excited, that got me working, 10, 12, 16 hours. That was the realization of, yeah, I found what I need to do. Now I need to get better at that.
Wow. So did you feel your background as a travel agent really sort of helped you? Like how, like not necessarily help you. What in your background as a travel agent helped you with marketing? Because I know travel agent, it's like you have to call, you have to market yourself, right? Like, why do I use Maya and not this other person? So did you, and you essentially have to market for the airlines and the cruise lines and all the trips, right? You're marketing for them in a sense, right?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, I worked for a travel agency that only did corporate travel, so It was a little bit different. But I think what I learned the most is actually how to communicate with people. I learned a lot about having an owner's mindset. I worked very closely with the executive team, so I was very close to the business. I learned what it meant. I knew how important working with clients was, and they had the most superb customer support. Like, they really cared about their customers, and it resonated throughout the business, and it's something that I care about till this day. So I think I didn't necessarily learn marketing skills, but I learned a lot of basic soft skills that have really helped me throughout my career.
Yeah. So no, I mean, thank you. I mean, me personally, how did I learn marketing? It was just, again, if you don't know how to market your own startup, it gets really expensive, especially if you're bootstrapped. And I remember I worked for another startup. It's like some marketing companies, like their minimum packages are like $25K, right, to even get something started. And then even like the cheaper ones sometimes are like $5K. So it's like, oh, I can't afford to spend whatever $5K per month, X amount of months. I'm still pre-revenue and all that. So a lot of it, and I think a lot of startups, they get very creative in terms of how you go. Like, for example, I'd answer questions on Quora and Reddit, and then I had a lot of, like, Reddit, it's like I found a lot of people who I got conversations with, and they gave me a little piece of info, and then I applied it. So what are some unique ways that you sort of, utilize marketing for the startups you worked with? Either one of you.
Chris?
Yeah, I'll give you Chris.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Creative ways. Oh my God. Okay. When you don't have money, so when I joined a company to lead marketing, I was employee number 25 maybe, and the only marketer, and I had no budget. Like, literally, your budget is zero, figure out what to do with that. So I used free tools as much as I could, and I talked to customers. That was the number one thing, and it really opened up a lot of different opportunities. First of all, because I finally understood why they were using our product and what they needed out of it, so that the product team could create something a little bit better and improve the product, but also to understand where they were spending their time, where they found out about our product, so that I can spend time there. We thought it was all on Facebook, but to be honest, a lot of it happened in store, because we had a mobile payment app, and most of our customers actually found out about us when they were in store. So instead of spending a ton of money on Facebook ads, we actually collaborated with some of the small businesses we worked with. We just gave them flyers, and we gave them incentives so they will get more people to use the app. So honestly, it all starts with just talking to your customers, and you can build on that and start getting creative.
Yeah, so I know it's right. The company's Kolu, right? How do you say it? There's like
Kolu. Yeah, that's the name. I've been fighting to change it since day one, but long story.
Okay, so that's a very interesting company, right? Just because and you also work. It's funny. So you work for SodaStream, right?
Yes.
So I did a project actually around that time. Was it, or maybe like let me see. I went
a little later.
No, I did the project because it was 2014. You're right. You were at SodaStream around then.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I'll just look at LinkedIn. So but no. So I actually did a project that semester when I had a project for school, and I think it was one of those stock projects, right? Choose a stock, and I chose like DPS. So I chose Dr. Pepper Snapple, and then we had to like do some competitors, and SodaStream was a competitor. Like, or that was something that they needed to be. I think they got acquired, right?
Yes, they were acquired by PepsiCo a few years ago.
Okay, and it was a pretty big. I remember it was a pretty big move.
Yeah, no, it was huge. And in general, it was a very interesting experience going from the startup world to consumer packaged goods, working with hardware. We were selling soda machines. But on the other hand, my job was to take the company online, go through a digital transformation and start selling online, which was pretty exciting. So I got to learn a lot, but I also got to learn that I need to love the product I work on, and I don't drink soda.
I don't really drink soda either. So yeah, I mean, it tastes very good, but yeah. So you felt that it just wasn't the same. You just didn't have the same passion.
Yeah, I mean, I had a great team, had a great experience just trying out different things, including a Super Bowl ad with Scarlett Johansson. That was incredible, although I did not get to meet her. But I got to be her online for like a day.
Yeah.
Very long story. But I learned a lot in terms of marketing, but I also realized how important it is to have passion for the company and the product you work on. At least for me, it makes my work that much better.
Cool. I mean, Chris, anything to add?
Well, I mean, to go back to the thought on how do you kind of build up startup marketing, for me, it's a lot of exposure and momentum, right? So, I mean, it's assuming that you understand why your product is important to the world, which Maya spoke to. From that point, it's almost building momentum, and it can start small and slow, and then you continue to build up and up and up. And if you do that, then the volumes, you can't ignore it at a certain point. And so we as human beings only notice change. So continuing to add and change the volume for people, to me, brings a lot of attention to you. And then, through that, you get more exposure and it sticks with people a little bit differently.
Yeah. And go ahead. Sorry.
I wanted to add one thing, and this is usually the biggest challenge I have with startup founders. You need to be very focused early on. There's no way in hell your audience is everyone, or men or women. It just doesn't work. You have to be super, super focused, go as niche as possible, start from there, build an audience, and then grow. That's like the number one mistake and the hardest thing to convey, because, startup founders, it's their baby and they think it's going to be great for everyone. So they just want to share it. But it's just not the right way to get started.
Yeah, no.
How do you help them develop that customer profile? I mean, because I think that you're absolutely right. You have to find that core demographic, and it's, when you set your mind to it and you get everybody involved, it's very possible. But a lot of the time, I've had a lot of opposition to even identifying that core demographic because of exactly that. They think it should be everybody.
So let me share a little story. When I first joined Kolu, it wasn't 100% clear who the target audience was. So we knew on the business side that we were targeting SMBs, but on the consumer side, it wasn't clear who was using the app. And my first week, I literally interviewed everyone in the company, from the CEO to the engineers to product and sales. And I was like, who is our customer? And there were a lot of opinions, but there was no data whatsoever. And I do not work with opinions. I learned from experience that would lead to a lot of mistakes. So, and we already had customers. We had a few customers. So I sent out a survey. I think we had like 5,000 people in our database. I sent out a survey, 100 people replied, and they told me exactly who they were. And the opinion was that we were talking to, very young professionals, tech savvy, maybe right after college. And it turned out we were talking to 30 to 35 with families who are very conscious about their buying habits, blah, blah, blah. A completely different audience. So I didn't even try to argue. I just did. I got the data that I needed by talking to customers. I mean, after that survey, I actually picked up the phone and spoke to customers just to validate, my assumptions. And then I got back to the CEO and to the entire company. And I did this presentation of who we think our customers are, who they really are. And to be honest, I didn't come to them and say, hey, you were wrong, but I try to use it as a way to explain why data is important. And from that moment on, the entire company started thinking, data first. Every question that we had, it was, okay, show me the data, show me the numbers.
Yeah, no, I think It's very important because it's like, yes, you think that, hey, if I capture this whole market, right? I've seen on resumes where some people want to say, hey, I'm penetrating a $4 trillion market. It doesn't matter how big the market you're penetrating are. It matters how much your revenue is, right? It doesn't
Yep.
matter. And people just think, hey, if I get 1% of a 4 trillion market, it's like, that's not how things work. And it's also, you just get better at identifying who your customers are, because if you're speaking to a specific demographic of customers, they want certain things. Trying to cater to everyone, right? Trying to listen to everyone is just the worst way, right? You'll just be forever developing your product and never get anything out, just because everybody wants different things. The other thing is you learn the distribution channels, you learn exactly the language they speak, you learn what they care about. You just get so much better data, and it's just those, and the customers tend to be in a certain circle, right? If you say, hey, do you know any other, you're like, yeah, because I know that what some people do is, like, let's say you want to target, I don't know, let's say grocery stores, right? Then you could kind of like, how do I target grocery stores? Because maybe they don't want to talk about their competition. You can say, hey, who are the supplier? The delivery people are this. Let me go ask them. Who do you deliver to? So it's like, you can do that. But when it's everybody, it's just like, hey, I have to go here, I have to go here, I have to, it just ends up being crazy.
Yeah.
And I find that, go ahead.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, because with Kolu, we worked with very small businesses. A lot of them were grocery stores. I can tell you that not all grocery stores are the same. So even within that specific niche, you need to make sure that you target the right ones to get, just to get started. So you really have to be specific. And if you don't have existing customers that you can talk to, then make a hypothesis who they are and go find those people and talk to them and see if they get excited, see if, they have any intention of working with you. And if someone is willing to pay, even if it's like a really small amount, then you probably found the beginning of a real audience.
Yeah. I think Justin Reynolds says this: aim small, you miss small. Aim big, you miss big. So I think that's a very accurate way.
Well said.
So, I mean, Chris, have you sort of worked with other startups in terms of marketing other than me?
I've had a couple startups. So I did a product development and prototyping a product development company early on with 3D printing. So I got very immersed into the 3D printing industry very early on. I got thrown to the wolves when it came to marketing. Even though I was pretty good at marketing, that particular industry was aggressive, and I had to learn fast and think on my feet. And so that was where a lot of my startup experience came from, was doing it for myself. And that was also where I learned how important it is to be very specific and very focused on which niche of a certain market. So a lot of people can look at, for instance, the 3D printing market. I did this same thing when I came into it. I said, I'm looking at the 3D printing market. If I capture 1%, I did exactly what you said. The problem is that there were definitely different levels. There was different little pockets that you could go after. And if you went after the whole thing, there were these monster companies that were just going to crush you all day long. And so when I realized that I needed to be a little bit more focused and go after product development, my company took off. And so at that point, it really taught me a valuable lesson. Then we applied that again at a much larger scale with a large corporation. It was the best. One of the best lessons that I ever learned was that market research was phenomenal. It's an incredible tool for people to know what the potential for growth is, but then also how to go after the types of customers that they want to capture, or at least entice to come work with you, right? So
yeah, I think another thing that I want to add is that when you start going niche, customers always ask you, what sets you apart? Be like, well, the fact that I cater to customers like you. That's so much easier than a big corporation who has these resources. You say, hey, look, I know your market. I can, usually on customer service, you're, quicker to respond in certain things. You get an actual human, and the fact that you know them a little more than these large corporations, right? And then it's like, okay, right? It just makes things a lot easier.
Yeah, I agree. It's a great angle if you are actually able to work more closely with, these businesses and give them more of like a hand-holding service and just really caring about them. The only problem is it doesn't scale.
Yeah, it doesn't scale.
You'll have to kind of step away from that and work with, more and more.
Yeah.
Customers.
I mean, look, as long as it brings in revenue, and the revenue can be pumped back to get it to scale, right? Because you know the Airbnb story, right, of how they sort of came up. Do either of you? I think Maya probably knows it.
I
How they
remember
use Craigslist.
vaguely.
Yeah, so the Airbnb story is they actually use Craigslist, and they use Craigslist listings, and then they'll direct them to Airbnb, and that's how they got it, and that's how they validated their idea. And then obviously they don't need to do that anymore, right? They built the brand, but that's how they really did it in the early days. How if you look for some listings, they'll say, hey, you know what, you can actually do it, and you have this, and it's just interesting how some startups really did things early and how they test ideas. And sometimes it's good to leverage other platforms. Now, Marcia asked, what's your go-to marketing strategy or segment? I think that's just tough in the sense that it totally depends on the company, the budget, what stage they're in, what their product is in. So that's very tough to answer. Fatima asked, speaking of niche marketing, what strategies would you focus upon to establish a target demographic, but without narrowing it to a point where it's a limitation? I'll kind of speak on that. I think if it's a very, very, very narrow group, sometimes you can charge a lot, right? That if you really solve a specific, you may only have a handful of customers. But I think that for the only thing you don't want is zero, right? You have zero people who are willing who have the problem or who are willing to pay for the problem. But if enough people pay, I think most people think that they need all the customers in the world. It's like you really don't. You'd be surprised at how many things cater to certain small communities. Let's kind of someone else. Yeah, go ahead.
I remember an example. I think it was Tim Ferriss when he wanted to promote his book, The 4-Hour Workweek.
Yeah.
He started with targeting men and targeting entrepreneurs. But today,
everyone
reads that book, but he knew to start with the people who were the most passionate about it and they were the most likely to start talking about it, that he actually grew word of mouth. So I think it's the same analogy. If you find that core that really loves you, gives you the right testimonials and case studies, you can grow from there. I think one misconception around marketing is that if you choose a story or a slogan or a headline, you're stuck with it. It changes every couple of months, especially when you're at a startup, and that's perfectly fine. You don't need to nail the story or the audience. You need a story with an audience, and you just get started from there. And if it's good, if you have product market fit, it will scale, and you will actually get signals from the market on who's the next audience you should be talking to, because they'll be the closest to your core audience, and they'll start coming to you.
Yeah, no, and then go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, Maya touched on something really interesting there. I personally love the concept of evangelizing, maybe customers, but more specifically groups of people, right? So that they're your mouthpiece. They're the ones going out and they're actually heralding your company and saying, this is amazing, we want to see more of this, etc. And a lot of that can be social proof, like the testimonials, but also sometimes it can just be a cause, right? So if your company can latch on to something that is valuable but aren't necessarily asking for anything in return, that can evangelize lots of people and draw attention to your name very easily. So I love that you mentioned that.
Yeah, evangelizing, I mean, for me, it's like you get some people who are like, they're really out there to help you just because either they have a personal experience or they just really love your mission. It just makes it so much easier, right? If you get 100 or 1,000 people who really spread it, as opposed to like, 10,000 people who just loosely identify with your product. This Marcia asked, and I don't know if you guys have used this. Do you guys know the source Help a Reporter Out, Hero?
Yeah.
So she asked, has anybody incorporated? So if you Google my name, any of the backlinks, any of the quotes are purely from Help a Reporter Out. I still answer the question. I have a detailed Excel spreadsheet of like how many I've sent out, how many have responded, how many I've gotten backlinks from. I think originally I was like 5 to 10%. I think I slightly got better to like 10 to 20, but that's how you can get some major backlinks. So have you used it on the source side or the contribution side, Maya?
Neither. I know of them, but
Okay.
I worked for a PR agency for 4 years, and this is what we were paid to do.
Yeah.
To these opportunities, and I don't think they even existed at the time. So I just learned how to do it myself.
Yeah.
I think I probably reached out to reporters about 50 to 100 different companies. So I kind of know how to do that by now.
Yeah.
But I never thought about doing it for myself. That would be interesting.
Well, the thing is, people do it as speakers, because I see some requests. It's like, hey, as a female who worked in this, how was it? And typically what they say, again, the hero request, the more niche you are in answering it, the better, the more likely, because they get so many submissions, right? Sometimes they get 50 to 100 plus. The ones they select. So if you go for entrepreneurship, competitive. If you go for very general category, but then it's like, hey, I need a PhD in biology who can talk about the coronavirus, or I need an MD who works at a large hospital to weigh in. And if you are an MD, they're only going to get, how many MDs are actually looking at Haro, right? And they're probably zero, but how many MDs are using a PR agency? Maybe there are a handful, but again, it's just very small, and it just really sets you apart.
It's also really expensive to hire a PR agency. So if you're a startup and you want to kind of growth hack your way into this, then you're going to have to work with a platform like Haro. It will take time, but it will probably give you better results than an agency. And I'm saying that after working for an agency.
Yeah, no, because agency is like what? Even on the, like, if you get lucky and you find a small, like, boutique firm, maybe you'll get $2K a month, right? I know one person who does it for $2K a month, but that's because he likes working with a small mom and pop. But, it's usually like $5K a month is like the typical minimum, right?
Yeah, at least.
Yeah, right, at least. I mean, what does it go like? What's typical? Because I don't know. Because look, once it goes above $2K a month, it's like that's outside my budget.
I know what we used to pay. We used to pay about $10,000 a month.
10 grand.
And it was probably not. I would have preferred to see 2 to 3 times as much content and exposure coming from it than what we did. And I think we could have gotten more out of it by spending more, but that was why we didn't, because it was.
Here's my problem with the agency model. They're getting paid a retainer no matter what the result is. That has always been my problem. And most of the time, they won't even commit to like giving you 3 placements, 5 placements. Like, we'll do what we can this month and we'll see what happens. And that drives me crazy. And, we did it a little bit differently at the agency when I worked there, but still almost every agency I reached out to since then just under-delivered.
So
overwhelmingly under-delivered.
So how would someone sort of filter an agency? Like, what's the way, how do you, like, if you were to, like, let's say you're going to hire an agency for whatever, how would you kind of filter them? Like, or you just wouldn't use them. You're like, I'm going to do it myself.
Well, here's the thing. I tried. Every company I worked with, I ended up trying to hire an agency. I hired a couple of them. I fired all of them. When I did it myself, it took less time and the result was better. And it's not because I'm like this, superstar. It's because I know the company better. I was able to come up with better angles. I knew how to position the company. It is very hard as someone from the outside to really nail it. If you want a good story, if you just want someone to repeat your announcement, they can do it. But I haven't come across an agency that knows how to do this well. So I just gave up on trying to hire them. I do it myself.
So do you feel like they're not spending enough time getting to know the customer? They're just sort of like, oh, okay, you hired me, here are results. Do you feel like that's a big disconnect and that would change the results? Like, if they spent more time, hey, Maya, what's your goal? What type of business? Who's your ideal customer? Do you feel that was lacking when you were talking to agencies?
That was lacking for sure. But I think it's also how they're built and the hierarchy and the fact that you have like 5 different people handling your account because one of them is sending reports and one of them is doing the weekly calls, blah, blah, blah. It just gets lost. So by the time you get to the copywriter, the person who's actually writing it, they have no idea who you are.
Yeah, Chris.
Well, I was just going to say that I think part of the issue with a lot of agencies is they don't do a good job onboarding the entire staff. They onboard the salesperson or they onboard, the one position within the company that's going to be your liaison. But the problem is that even though that one person understands it really well, the people that are executing the work don't. And so, it's like you were saying, it gets lost. I think that there's better models, but typically the model has to be a smaller team. It has to be a 2 or 3, 4 person team. And you're basically hiring in your staff at that point to a certain extent rather than hiring an agency.
Yeah, I mean the silo thing is very interesting. I actually did a resume for someone recent, not too long ago, who said how they were like a product manager of a large company, and they said what the big issue was. It was just very lack of communication. It was like a process that took like 45 days,
That
through a
side
review,
too.
and then it went down to like 3 days. And a lot of it was wait time. Like I had to wait for this person to do this, and this person didn't know that, so it would come back and forth. So it's like, oh, this person knew. Okay, I could save so much time if, hey, I know this is not going to pass review because of X, Y, Z. So that, and these things I'm pretty sure just happen all the time.
Yeah, that's my experience with the corporate world. Anything that you can get done in 2 days will take 3 to 5 weeks.
Yeah, at least.
And,
Are you sure it's not never?
but you know what? There are ways to hack that.
There are ways to hack that. So what would you suggest, like, if you're allowed to say?
Well, here's an example. I won't say the company's name, but
Yeah.
when I worked for a big corporation and I had my background with PR, I worked for a small team and I really wanted to do a PR outreach about, a program that we were launching, but I was not allowed to do that because there are specific people inside the organization who are assigned to specific reporters and specific blogs, and you can't reach out to them directly. So I had to wait, and I try to get to the right people. And what happened is that I realized if I wait for them, I will be waiting for 3 to 6 months until someone will actually kind of put me in the queue to get some PR attention. So I dug around a little bit to try and understand what is qualified as PR. And if you do thought leadership, where you are actually contributing the content and you're not getting a reporter to tell the story, and it's not necessarily directly about the company, then it's not a problem. No one cares. What we ended up doing is just writing thought leadership content and getting into every tech that you can imagine within a couple of weeks of working with a team instead of waiting 3 to 6 months. And yeah, that worked really well.
So do you kind of see this sort of culture changing, or do you, because only, right, especially at some large, right, some of the tech companies, especially as it gets more competitive for data and all that, and new startups are coming, do you see this changing, or are they trying to change it? Do you see that happening?
I don't know. I think it really depends on the people you work with. I mean, it's a huge generalization if I say like all corporates work like this. Sometimes when you work within a great team, you can get 90% of the job done the way you like it. But then in the 10% where you have to communicate with like the mothership, then you have some challenges. And it's a problem with big companies because they need that process.
Yeah.
There are so many people. We're not talking 1,000 people. We're talking 100,000 people. It is just very difficult. I can understand why it's hard.
Yeah.
Well, more, leeway to do what they want to do.
Yeah.
I guess you just need to figure out if you want to live with it and kind of try to change it from the inside, or just go to a smaller startup and basically do whatever you want.
Yeah. No, I mean, it is very true. Because even like for my podcast, right, a lot of the things I think, like I have an assistant and she'd be like, is this okay? I'm like, yeah, you do whatever. Right. It's like, there's no, my approval is like, yes, like I've never had like a non-approval, but yeah, I do understand where it's like you get someone who's so far removed from the mission that they could really misrepresent the company, and it could definitely backfire.
And it can happen the other way too. I mean, it can either be overprotective and then nothing happens. I've seen that before too. And then, like you mentioned, somebody who's not paying attention to the best interests of the company, and they're starting fires everywhere. So, there's certainly a balance that's got to take place. But to talk to a little bit to what Maya was talking about, maneuvering the corporate structure, for me, it was very much understanding the ops flow of the company. If I knew who the people that I needed to get to at the end of the day, and if there were ways that I could create my own shortcuts, I would do that. I wouldn't really ask for permission, and it upset some people, but for the most part, it was about getting the job done. And really studying that ops flow made a big difference in being able to move to the top very quickly through the right channels. So.
Yeah, no, I think it's the corporate structure. It all really depends on the person at the top, right? Because they sort of encourage a certain type of mindset, and they encourage how to do certain things. Because I found that what happens is there's always like one person that stops a chain that people fear, or they're like, oh, I gotta go past Andy or Carl. It's like, oh no. And whereas like everybody else is like, look, I wish it was this way, but this person likes this person, and this person is friends with that team, or they like the vendor, and it just kind of stops, right?
Yes. I got really good advice from my manager at Microsoft. I think it was my first week, and he said, ask for forgiveness, don't ask for permission.
I love it.
And it worked really well.
Yeah. I mean, really, it comes if you
15 years. I love it.
Yeah, I mean that Chris tells me that all the time, and so I think it's important, right? That obviously produce the results, right? You have to make sure that when you don't ask for permission, you better produce results. Don't ask for permission, and then you fail, and then it's like.
And you need common sense. You can't do something that is going to affect the entire company as a whole. You can do something smaller that probably only going to affect their business unit or something like that. Like, don't go tell a story about Microsoft in the news without getting approval. That's a really quick way to get fired.
Yeah. Did you ever see that happen personally?
No, not to that extent. People are not crazy.
Okay.
They usually catch you before you hit that point, anyways.
Yes.
So what was one of if either your or someone where they sort of didn't ask for permission and they got something and it was like, wow, like it produced. Do you have any stories off the top of your head, or Chris, do you have any of those stories?
I've got a few.
Sure.
For me, we were developing a website, and just for a specific company I was working at, and we started the project. The CEO knew what was going on, but there were people above the CEO, and they didn't know what was going on with the project. And so the CEO and I had decided that we were going to move forward. And then, he basically gave me autonomy to go for whatever I needed to do to get this off the ground. And we were spinning wheels with the parent company because the parent company was telling us that it was going to be another 3 months and another 3 months. And we made promises to our customers about this new website for months. And it was already overdue. And so because, long story short, we decided to pull the trigger and launch the website. And within about 2 hours, I had a phone call of what's going on. But it was the right move for the company in the long run. And ultimately, I'm glad that we made that decision because I think that it really benefited the company in a way that gave the customers exactly what we told them they were going to give them, and it didn't continue to allow us to bleed out the time that we were losing every day that it didn't go live. So
yeah.
So
the thought leadership story, that was this case. I didn't really ask for permission. I just did it, and after we got featured like on Forbes and TechCrunch, I just kind of circled back to everyone. Look, we're on TechCrunch, and everyone was so happy, and no one really bothered to ask how that happened. So I was very happy with that.
I love that.
Yeah, I mean, for my thing, I think I have a small enough organization, just small that it's like in order for a startup to compete, they got to be fast and quick, right? That's one thing that you have. That's one advantage. It's like, hey, if you want something, it can be done. You can buy something. You don't have to go through approval. There's no procurement. It's just like, hey, do I feel that this is the right decision? There are pros and cons of that. I think having healthy team dynamics. So what, in terms of teams, like what are sort of the personalities you see in marketing, right? Like what type of personalities and what type tends to do the best?
Oh, wow. I don't necessarily think it has to do with your marketing ability. I think just different mindsets set people apart. So for me, I always prefer to hire people with potential and passion as opposed to experience. Like I would have someone with like 6-7 years of experience, someone just getting started. But if I got the vibe from them that they're going to work for me day and night because this is their dream, I would hire them without hesitation.
Love that. For me, it's I think that there's when you talk about personality, I think that there's that fire, there's that passion, there's definitely a lot of instinct in a lot of ways, and you can kind of dig into that a little bit when you're talking to them for the first time. You can say, what would you do in this situation, and kind of get them to think creatively and try and give you the next 2 or 3 steps. And so for me, that's a big trigger. And then I agree with Maya 100%. It's like, I love potential. I want to hire to replace. Like, I want somebody to take my job so that I'm able to either move on or move up, right? So especially in the entrepreneur journey, that's a challenging hurdle to overcome from a pride aspect, but once you do, your teams will be much stronger. I want to run a pack of wolves. I don't want to run a pack of puppies, right? So.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a great analogy, because especially in a startup, right, you don't want to be, right, processes are important, but you don't want to be managing them, right? You want to focus on strategy, you want to focus on execution, you want to, right, give people the tools that they're making the right decisions and they're doing the right thing and they have the dream. So let's slowly start to wrap up. For those of you in the crowd, Maya's actually going to be one of the speakers. We're having a career fair next week, so you can ask her more career-related questions. So I'm going to put the link in that, so feel free to check that out. Feel free to message me if you want that, if you have any questions. If you know anybody who's hiring, I'd love to I know it's a tough time for everyone. To sort of wrap up, how was it sort of consulting for these big companies, right? Because you've consulted for like a Google and you've worked in these environments. Like, how was it, right? Because they're not startups, right? And they are their own category. Like Google and like a Facebook is its own category, where it's like it is a startup culture type thing, but then it's the largest company in the world, so it's not a startup, right? Like, you have these companies that are like, hey, we have like, I don't know, they're just like these quasi startups that say they're startups to be startups, but it's just a whole different process.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's about the team that you work with, because you don't get to experience the entire company, and different teams can be dramatically different. And I was very lucky to work with a team that is startup oriented. They all had, that entrepreneurial mindset, very small, very agile. So as long as we kept it within that group, that was great. And then every time we had to work with a corporate, we had to play nice. And it was a little bit more challenging, but not too bad.
Yeah. So yeah, I think, thank you guys. Jayanta, do you have any final words, either of you?
No, just want to go into marketing. This is probably the best time ever to go into marketing. It is just more exciting, tons of different tools, tons of abilities, tons of different disciplines coming in, and it's getting more and more valuable within the organization. So if you're into marketing, I would highly recommend to go into it.
Yeah. Do you mind if I tag you if people want to connect?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, let me tag. All right, Chris, I can't tag on my, I don't know. It's so annoying. I can't tag on the live stream. I don't know. Lives are really weird. Chris, any final thoughts?
I think that there's just definitely do your research when you're talking to people who are offering to do marketing. Try to find out whether they do marketing or if they do, like we discussed earlier, advertising or some other smaller part of marketing. And then, go to what their strengths are. Obviously there's sometimes you have to build your own team. Sometimes you're able to get somebody who does marketing and can pull those teams together for you. But just be careful, because if you do marketing badly, it can really damage a company. And if you do it really well, you'll never look back. So,
so you said doing marketing badly. I think this is a Super Bowl commercial from Groupon. They did a Super Bowl commercial years ago. I still haven't used Groupon since, and they've had some great deals, but I just refused. So there was a Super Bowl commercial, and it was like the Tibetan monks, right? They suffer, blah, blah, and they show that they're getting burned alive. And then it was like, oh, but you can order your favorite Tibetan dish from Groupon at whatever. You can go get it. It was just like so off base. It was just like you couldn't. I thought it was going for a charity, donate for a cause, and it went to like Groupon, and I haven't bought Groupon since. So it's like these things stick, right? And especially to certain demographics. Just want to thank both of you for a wonderful discussion. Want to thank both of everyone in the live. Put a heart or a thumbs up or one of those things that float in the air when you do the live stream. Thank you, Maya. You're always welcome to come back. So really appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you, everyone. And until next time, we'll be done. So just check out the career fair. I put the link. Let me see. Let me put the link again. Maya will be speaking. If you know anyone looking for a job or just anyone just looking for career development, I think that's very important, right? That most people, like, you know, you've consulted for all these large companies. Like, as a travel agent, did you ever think like this is the route your career would go?
No, but this was the point when I started actually thinking about my career and planning. Once I found something that I really loved, I wanted to do more of that. So I actually started building a career roadmap, and I followed that to get to where I am today.
So do you still have a career map going forward? Like, you still have another one you're reevaluating?
All the time, every single year, or every time I have a big change, this is exactly what I do.
Okay, cool. So thank everyone. I appreciate each and every one of you. You're getting a lot of light bulbs, so I typically don't see that. So you must have really said some wonderful things. So thank each one of you. So now we'll end the broadcast. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.